We're live now. I'm here with Santana Innes with the Glowy organization, and we're just going to be talking about empowering women on online environments and in the real world and everything we can do. So I'm delighted to have this conversation. Go ahead and tell us about yourself.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me into your space to have this conversation. It feels really timely
Ugh.
with everything that we're seeing, in the media. I think there's a lot going on, like literal wars and everything, but we're also seeing a lot of really subtle things that affect women specifically. So a little bit about me and my background. My name is Santana Innes, and I am the founder and executive director of an organization called the Glow Initiative, Glowy for short. Our work focuses on eradicating the access gap to professional coaching for women. And we particularly work with women who would otherwise not have access. So underserved women, whether that means, they're women of color, or they could be coming from low socioeconomic backgrounds, or any other intersections that would make it difficult for them to access coaching. So that's a little bit about me and my work. And I'm just, again, happy to be here.
Oh, and then I've got this book by Sherry Dunn, Qualified. It made me think of that. I'm interviewing her on Wednesday. And yeah, and this is something that my wife has had to deal with, being a Latina, an immigrant, and just she's encountered that the workspace. One of the things when she started her because she was an educator in Peru. She came here. She was an assistant, and to get her license, they had to get her degree. We had to get her degree that she had in Peru accredited. They determined that she was qualified to teach English as a second language, but not Spanish. And it's just like, yeah. And well, it's one of those things where we say this and we're like, gee, that sounds silly. And it's like, but it's by design, because white supremacy, it goes hand in hand with oppressing women. It just does. The
Yeah,
patriarchal system is exactly the same. They don't want
100%.
immigrants. I mean, there's always a shortage of Spanish teachers, but we have these deliberate mechanisms to keep people who are qualified from teaching Spanish from being able to take those jobs. Yeah, I mean, well, but all these things tie together. I'll let you respond. I mean, it ties into the coaching. I had to do a lot to help her to get her along, but
Yeah,
it's heartbreaking how many very, very qualified people just do not have the opportunity
yeah.
to go through these steps and to get the positions of power they deserve and they're qualified for.
100%. And I mean, I think even so, I'm glad that your wife had you, right, to help navigate some of these systems that are incredibly complex by design. But I also think about
Yep.
last year's McKinsey Lean In State of Women report, which I have a lot of beef with. Lean In as a premise and an ethos. But, they found that even for women in the United States that are employed in corporations, right? So even when we start talking about that, there's some level of privilege that we're talking about. So even when they're employed in corporate America, they do not have equal access to coaching, sponsorship, or mentorship at any level of their career,
Okay.
whether it's intro, whether they're middle management, whether they're C-suite or above. They lack equitable access to these tools that help people navigate systems and to excel in their careers. So when we start talking about adding any layer of intersection, right? If we're talking about immigrants or people of color, or we're talking about people that don't work in corporate America, right? There's a lot of people that work, they work in the gas station, or they work in housekeeping services, or they work in the fields. They definitely don't have access to coaching because the average cost of a coaching hour in the United States, or North America rather, is $272 an hour. So, we're asking people, particularly women, to navigate a
Yeah.
patriarchal corporate employment landscape, and we're doing it already with their hands tied behind their back. And then on top of that, we're not giving them access to the types of tools that their lateral white male counterparts have
Yeah.
ready and equal access to.
Yeah, and I mean that well, a lot of what you're saying, it came out I read, Kamala Harris's book, and it's just like the extra pressure of you have to look perfect, but your outfit, it has to be or like, Fetterman can just trot around in his sweat, his hoodie, but Kamala Harris has to be perfect, and then so it's like a couple extra hours every day, and a lot of the things you're talking about, there's this unfair social expectation where there's just the burden of so many things about maintaining a household fall to women. And it's been my privilege where I've always worked from home, so my wife worked outside of the house. And what I found too is, a lot of men, they just never, and this is maybe this is just a point where we can encourage people, but just, you know, until I was able to every day have my children fall asleep on my chest, I'm not able to develop that bond, and it's just different where, you know, my wife has she has the baby inside her for all these years. I don't get to, I'm there, I'm supporting, but it's only afterwards when I am able to do this. So we need this social shift where the men are just more engaged in that. And like you said, I helped my wife to get her licensure and then to get her master's degree, and I was an assistant in that. And the people around her were like congratulating her because they're like, that takes this community. But it's not enough. It's not enough that my family overcame this obstacle. This keeps being my point of activism. Is that it's not enough for us to get by it. We have to remove those obstacles for all the other people that come forward. I have my daughters are coming into the world, they're coming into the things. Yeah, and we need that psychological shift.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's such an important perspective because, if you look at Ruth Bader Ginsburg's feminism, it was a feminism of really truly seeking equity. And we could go down the rabbit hole of how patriarchal systems also block men from access to paternity leave, right?
Mhm.
And even when those systems exist, they're often discriminated against, blocked from
Yeah.
advancement, or made redundant or something if they make themselves, if they avail themselves of the very little that's actually out there
Mhm.
for fathers when they are bringing new children into the world. So that's definitely a perspective. But when we think about breaking systems down, right, and kind of breaking out barriers, this is something that the Glow Initiative does. When I became a coach, it was after a career climbing the corporate ladder as a first generation Latina American. On my father's side, first generation. On my mother's side, a daughter of the revolution. So, really, like America.
Perfect.
Like, you can't be more American. And so, climbing the ladder and looking like I look, I was very often the only in a room. I was very often, you talked about the Kamala Harris example. You have to look presentable, but not too sexy because then you're sleeping your way to the top, but you have to look good enough
Yeah.
that, and then there's this stuff that women of color with their hair going into the workplace. I would have people comment, if I wore my hair curly
Yeah.
into the office, they would say, "Are you feeling lazy today? Like, why didn't you do your hair? You look like." These are the
Yeah.
kinds of things
And
that,
white people just grabbing your hair, like, "What the heck?" I've
yeah, it's
seen people do
weird.
this. "Oh, look at your hair," and they like, that's not appropriate. I've
It's
seen that
weird. Why are
too.
you touching me?
Whoa, what went through your brain? Yeah, it's like the state of mind to do
Yeah,
that to somebody. Yeah.
absolutely. But we've gotta break down the systems, I think there's a special place in hell for people that walk through a door and close it behind them, and by walking through a door, I mean,
Yeah.
like, your wife gained access to completing her master's degree. If she then went out and made it harder for immigrant Latinas to get their
Yeah.
master's degree, there would be,
Yeah.
like, it's the 7th circle. It's even 1 circle down in Dante's fucking circles of hell,
Yes.
right? For me, I like to walk through a door and then bust down the fucking
From the other
hinges,
side, yeah.
like,
Yeah,
break
absolutely.
them down, sledgehammer, throw the door in the landfill, or recycle if possible. But,
Yes.
that's sort of where I'm trying to operate, is to
Yes.
really identify where systems are failing and then, really from the outside get in some good trouble.
Well, it adds so much more credibility when you're a person, because otherwise, if you've never made it through that, people are like, "Well, you're just being lazy because you're." But having gone past that obstacle, when you say, "I went past that obstacle is unfair," that gives you so much more credibility then, because it's like, "I've established that I did it. It's unfair. That has to be removed." One of the things you said though about coaching, and I wanna just kinda bring it into my experience, because one of the things my wife and I do, she started out as the assistant. She worked, she just started out volunteering. She'd come here. We were trying, like, what are we going to do now that you're in the United States? So she was volunteering in these schools. She became like a teacher's assistant, and it was kind of comfortable. And then it's like, okay, we got to advance. And like you said, nobody at the school helped her advance. And we ended up, I was sending out messages to superintendents of other school districts, found one that was willing to get her into this teacher program. And so since then, she's navigated this program. And since then, she has taken it upon herself to a lot of the people that she knows in her community, these mothers who are looking for something else to do. It says, hey, we can help you. I know the process, how we can get into this program. It's expensive, but it was like $10,000 for in over a year. So it's like, yeah, that's a lot, but it's like you can navigate this, and there is a thing on the other end where you will get a job, that pays you twice what you're getting paid now, depending on how young you are. But yes, we've been walking people through this program to help empower them. And I'm just finding my wife now with her master's degree in the school district is a powerful representative and a powerful voice for all these other groups. And she's also, well, she's an inspiration. She tells her students, first of all, she tells them, you're not forgetting your Spanish. You go home and you tell your parents you're speaking Spanish. We're multinational. Spanish is our culture. It's our identity. We speak that. And the only reason they tell you not to speak that is because they want to control you. The more people that just empowers you, the more languages you can speak. But then also helping the other mothers with this coaching. But I'm kind of curious what you have to say about other ways. What other programs do you have in other realms where people can come to your platform and find ways to advance in their career, and what kind of resources? And just give us the overview.
Yeah. So glowy, what we try not to do is be duplicative because I think in the nonprofit space, hey Margaret, we see you.
From the
um,
hearts. Yeah.
in the nonprofit space specifically, and last year Glowy became a 501(c)(3). So in that space, you'll find very often that there are lots of nonprofits that are kind of doing really similar work, and it's really difficult to sustain a nonprofit. So we didn't want to build anything that somebody else was already building or already existed. So what we actually do is we go into existing nonprofits that serve women,
Okay.
and we help them to expand their program depth or efficacy by bringing the coaching to the women that they're already serving. So, for example, this year we had 11 nonprofit partners so far this year. We've worked with organizations that are working sort of at the intersection of women of color, first time entrepreneurs, or workforce development. That's a track. We also had really interesting partnerships with an organization that's facing sex trafficking survivors, an organization facing women who elected to go into the sex trade but are now rebuilding new economic pathways for themselves outside of the trade of the life. We also partnered with an organization that is facing domestic violence survivors, right? So there are all sorts of pockets of women in the United States that are underserved. It's not necessarily
Mhm.
based on race or their immigration status. That is definitely something that creates just an additional hurdle to accessing services. But there are so many nonprofits out there that are already doing community level service engagement with sensitive, vulnerable populations. And so we
Yeah.
go in and we bring the coaching to them
Okay.
so that and these are the same coaches, like, Margaret's one of them, right? So this is the quality of coaching, right? You have coaches that are used to coaching the C-suite, the executives of America. You have coaches with 40 years of leadership experience or, you know, thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of one-on-one, and that's the same coaching that women that come through our doors are getting access to. So it's really incredible. This year we crossed the threshold. We have matched over 500 women who would otherwise not have had access to professional coaching. We just crossed that milestone this month. And we've only been at it for 2 years. So really
Nice.
the sky is the limit. And so something that I always tell people when they ask, like, how can I get involved or how can I fight this good fight? I think that what we're seeing in the United States right now in terms of policy and Project 2025 or whatever the hell that thing is called,
Yeah.
there's a comms level battle that's being fought, right? The trad wife, like,
Yeah.
harkening back to this faux past that never existed. So there's this sort
Yeah.
of communications level where there's a little bit of warfare, comms warfare going on against women. But also saw last year over 600,000 Black women were laid off and
Yep.
did not re-enter the workforce, right? So women are losing their jobs in mass. They're having a very hard time getting those jobs back. And so that means that for primary, like, breadwinner moms, or for single moms, or just for women that deserve the full spectrum of their human rights and fucking dignity, man,
Yep.
are having trouble navigating this landscape. And so you don't have to solve politics. You can donate a little bit of money to nonprofits that are already fighting this fight. There's more than one way to show up to the work. Indeed, Glowy is showing up into the work. We're not a political organization, but it's somehow become political to just think that women
Yeah.
should have access to services. Like,
Mhm.
that's bonkers, but here
Yep.
we are. That's the world that we're living in, and so I gladly show up and I gladly expand this access to women so that they can have the same amount of counsel, guidance, support, encouragement, validation that is really required to grow in your career, grow in your financial security, grow in your
Yeah.
personal development. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. And just all the people I talked to, it's been really interesting this week, especially. A lot of people, and you're giving me a lot of ideas they line up and they resonate with a lot of the other things I've been working on. But just meeting the activism of the moment, I've often reflected, like, just supporting my wife. And she's a completely capable person. She could have done all these things on her own. It's easier to do things with support, is frankly,
yeah.
that's the way it goes. And having her just make that move, go from being the teacher's assistant to becoming the teacher, then to becoming, they're kind of setting her up to be the ELL coordinator for the whole district because she's just getting to that point. And just the more we can do, because everybody focuses, oh, we got to get rid of this guy in the Oval Office. And it's like, look, there's all these levels we can direct our activism, and just empowering women at every level of our society is the easiest way. And I'm just like, I get into so many fights with people, and it's like they're afraid of women. I mean, we can always see what these corrupt systems, these patriarchal systems, these authoritarian systems of white supremacy, the number one thing, the first thing they do, they suppress women. They take power away from women because that's their number one fear. That's what's going to topple them. And just the integrity of women. And it's like, men are they're just too susceptible to corruption. It's like that's a characteristic of men. It's an exception, it's an anomaly when you see these. And then people point out like Pam Biondi, is that her name? And it's like, yeah, she was appointed by a corrupt man. So don't
Yeah.
that's a disingenuous example. As a general rule, you just don't see the corruption among women that you see among men. That's just a fact. And just so the more we can be like men being more comfortable being in these roles of support for me was just it never made sense. It's like, why would I not help my wife make more money? And then if something happens to me, my children are taken care of. Why wouldn't I provide that assistance? It's like, I'm not always here. I'm not healthy all the time. I don't always make good decisions. I know that pretty clearly. So the more we can just uplift the people that are supposed to be our support groups. But you're right, like just this overarching pressure and like all the money that's dumped into things like, we have the Charlie Kirks who are going around heavily funded, spewing just lies and misogynistic bullshit on college campuses. They
Yeah.
also target college campuses. We have religious, and to this day, I mean, the Pope is doing great work, but they don't even consider a woman for Pope. So screw that guy is basically what I'd say. It's like until you're in a position where you are elevating and you make it so that it's not based on discrimination that you get that position. Zero respect for me, flat out. It's like everything else you do is kind of corrupted by that. And I think we just need to be more open about that. Like you said, it's political, but at the end of the day, everything is political, isn't it? And so we might as well just lean into it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, everything's political at the end of the day. The personal is political, right? Wherever our lives are touched by society, like we live in a society, we have a social contract, right, with our government. And so it is a rare privilege to have an experience in which politics does not touch your life ever, right? That's an experience that must be incredibly nice, but is reserved for an incredibly small percentage of human beings. But I think bringing in like the Charlie Kirks and the manosphere, I don't know if you saw the recent documentary from Louis Theroux on Netflix about the manosphere. There is this really important nexus that's happening that I think we need to pay incredibly close attention to, and that is the rise of fascism and the increasing vulnerability of young men on the internet. So this sort of hallmark of let us sow a seed, a story of this idealistic past that didn't actually exist. But in that past, men were men and women were women, and everybody was happy. And the women were so happy. They weren't stressed. They didn't have to, climb the ladder. And the men, they were doing manly things, and like everybody was happy,
Yeah.
and they were chopping wood, and the women were making pies, and
We were just
everyone was
chopping
just
wood.
so
Yeah.
happy and life was stress free.
Yeah.
This is one of the classic hallmarks of fascism. And when you look to authoritarian regime change over time, it's just like disenfranchising women, pushing women out, and putting this narrative in of this idealistic past where men were men and women were women. This is part of the slide into authoritarianism. And so you see this starting to happen with the trad wife movement, and indeed some of definitely this manosphere. That documentary is deeply chilling and important, and I would recommend that everybody watch it. What we're not always paying attention to is that there are, tens of thousands of young, vulnerable,
Yeah.
relatively isolated young men that find their community almost exclusively
Yeah.
online.
Mhm.
And when they hear a message that says, hey, there used to actually be a time where young men didn't feel so bad,
Yeah.
right? They had everything they needed, and they were strong, powerful men, and they had all the money and they had all the value, and women threw themselves at
Yeah.
them. It's sort of this like it's intoxicating.
Yeah.
And if we're not paying attention to that in the same conversation that we're talking about a rise in misogyny, a rise
Yeah.
in the epidemic of violence against women all over the world, but particularly in the United States, which is the conversation we don't often have.
Yeah.
If we're not paying attention to what's going on over there in the manosphere and the experience of young boys, it's not my work, but it needs to be someone's work, because
Yeah.
this is a really big problem. And it seems like a solution to these young men, but ultimately, this is something that harms them in the end.
Yes.
So, I don't know. I'd love to hear if you've seen that
I've got
documentary or
thoughts.
kind of what came up.
Yeah, somebody said they just wanted you to share the name of the documentary again that you just mentioned.
Manosphere. The
Okay, the Manosphere.
Manosphere. It's from the documentarian Louis Theroux, and
Okay.
it is on Netflix.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of what you said is coming up, and I've been reflecting on this a lot lately because I grew up in this rural community. My parents built the house we grew up in. They just talked, stacked some logs, and that's what we lived in. It was nicer than that, but it was literally a house that they built. So it was middle of nowhere rural community. And a lot of my life, a lot of my journey has been like just rejecting this toxic masculinity, this patriarchal society you find in conservative rural spaces. It led me to moving to Peru. I'm just like, and that was basically, I'm either going to die if I stay here or I'm just going to take a leap of faith. So I was able to live in Peru where it's just like, yeah, you get to see the Latin type culture is just so much more. It's so much more warm, and just there's just so much more of an emphasis on family. And they adopted me like a long lost son, and and my wife always makes these comments too because she'll see like white families, they'll have their baby out in the sun without any cover and no sun, and they're like the kid's burning. It's like why is like cruelty such a part of this? And we're in a relatively rural space now, but it's like that that march back to like me actually getting back in a place where I can have a healthy relationship because that is beaten out of you. And I think that's a critical thing what you're saying. And this is borderline and almost sounds like what I'm saying is let's take pity on, but I want to identify the problem. And what I remember from when I was a young man growing up in one of these rural communities with this manosphere stuff that I rejected on a physical level because it made me physically sick. I had asthma and I had all these eating problems. Like the body rejects these things,
Yeah.
but you just don't have the guidance, right? And it took me having to just leave the country until I was able to rebuild this. But the fundamental characteristic there is loneliness. And they're just so
Mm.
desperately lonely. And it gets to the point like, because you're not allowed to do anything that seems effeminate. So you're not allowed to dance. And it wasn't until I went to South America and I'm just like the 10th beautiful woman came up to me and asked me to dance. I'm finally like, why do I have this conditioning to not dance with these beautiful women when they want to dance with me? And so it's like, okay. And then I started dancing. You get over your vulnerability and your awkwardness, but it's this long path. And the young men of our society, yeah, there are predators out there who recognize that they are lonely and they're sexually frustrated because we just don't talk about sexual health. We don't recognize that it's not gay or straight. Instead, the reality is a big, huge spectrum, and there's a lot of experimentation you should do that's totally healthy, but people will be subjected to just cruel beatings, like savage beatings for even just like expressing affection to a male friend, without it even. And so it's just like, that's the level we're at. And it's sort of like, okay, Neurodivergent mentioned before, and it was a good comment because Neurodivergent said that didn't really wanted to believe that it's a innate trait that men are corrupt. And I think that is a fair thing to say. I think the current generation of men are corrupt. I don't think they necessarily have to be corrupt if we actually provided some guidance and instead of weaponizing like completely normal and natural questions about sexuality, instead of weaponizing those or like natural feelings so that kids feel shame for feeling attracted to people and then they like suppress it because they still have those feelings, but they know that they're being, shunned by their society just for being kind. Naturally, that's going to lead to violence, and men are going to be the tools of this violence. But just so much of our society has normalized these just unhealthy interactions. American society, the patriarchal society of control,
Yeah.
which just doesn't emphasize companionship or decency or compassion or empathy or understanding or care. And once we start adding those into the system, everybody will feel better. So that's a big answer.
No, I mean, that's a beautiful answer. And I thank you so much for sharing so much of your personal experience with it because I think it underscores such an important through line. One of the things that you find in patriarchy and in misogyny, both, because they're intimately acquainted, is this idea that dominance will get you access to everything that you could need or
Yeah,
desire in life when dominance is antithetical to love, right?
yeah, yeah,
Love is the only thing that could get you access to everything that you need in life relationally, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Relationally. And whether that is familial love, whether it's platonic love with your same sex friends, your opposite or any gender spectrum friends, whether it's romantic love, whether it's sexual love, whatever it cannot coexist with dominance
Mhm, mhm.
because dominance goes hand in hand with coercion. You might get someone to submit to you through dominance and
Yep,
coercion, but they won't love you,
yeah,
right?
yep.
That's not truly possible in systems of dominance. There's another book that I would really highly recommend on the topic. It's called Boys and Sex. And it's written by a sociologist who went in, and it's almost an ethnography. So she went in and she followed a cohort of young men between the ages of 15 to 25 over a really critical period of their life that slide from high school into college. And she would ask them, like, what are the things that you're seeing? How do you relate to your male friends? And one of the things that really stood out to me from that book is the performance of masculinity. It starts happening so young for young men and young boys,
Mhm.
and they're policing each other. And they're policing each other's performance of masculinity so much that they start to identify heterosexual relationships or sexual activity as quote unquote gay. Oh, you love your girlfriend? That's so gay, bro.
Yeah.
When the literal opposite of homosexuality, right? Being in a healthy, relational, emotional, and sexual dynamic with a member of the opposite sex is threatening to your perception of masculinity in your social group,
Yeah,
that they police themselves into further and further and further isolation.
yeah,
And
yeah,
this is happening to very young men and very young boys.
yeah,
And it's something that we have to really examine as a society because a performance of masculinity, I don't even use the word toxic masculinity, but when masculinity is reduced to a performance that can only be successful when it is synonymous with dominance,
yeah. Yep, yep.
that is a slippery slope, high speed rail, one way ticket to loneliness,
Yes.
lifelong, lifelong, because it cuts you off from relational, healthy, dynamic presence,
Yeah,
not only between you and who might be your sexual paramour, right? But also between your same and any other gendered friends and your family, your parents, your
yep,
community. You cannot feel love through dominance. And if we don't start looking at this,
yeah.
it's not Chloe's work, but it needs to be someone's because I don't know if you know anyone that's working in this space, but we talk about different ways to be in your activism. This is a way that men like I know that the right love to make fun of Kamala Harris's running mate.
Walls, Tim Walls, yeah.
Tim Walls. They love making fun of him. But wow, what a healthy
Yeah,
example.
yeah. My
What
wife
a
said,
healthy example. That man loves his kids,
"Yeah."
he loves his wife, he loves his community, and his love drives his service.
Yes, yes. My wife said, she's like, "You've got a little bit of Tim Walls energy." She said that to me, and I thought that was a lovely compliment that she gave me. But I am working on this because what you're talking about is the white supremacy ideology. And when you look at it, we have this awful person in the Oval Office who is, he insists his whole life is about this narrative of perfection and superiority over the reality of his constant perpetual failures. And that dominance idea, we teach that in the United States. We emphasize competition over cooperation to the point where people don't even recognize it's like I compete. I'm on a basketball team, and it's like, yeah, What about your teammates? Do you cooperate with them so you can win? They don't even recognize that in being on a team, you're cooperating with your teammates in order to compete. Like these things go together. But one of the things I learned, and with this idea of solitude, is because the white supremacy mindset, and I would say American exceptionalism is the same as American superiority. You always have to win. White supremacy is the cultural identity of the United States. You always have to win to the point where, even if you lose, the people who witness your loss, you can't tolerate them in the world because your ego is, I am an all time winner. That's why the current guy, when he lost the election in 2020, he still can't tolerate that. He can't have that visible loss because it attacks his identity, his self identity of being the all time winner. And again, white supremacy disregards reality. But I found too, if you are constantly beating people at everything you do, you don't have any friends. Nobody likes to be around a guy who beats them at everything. So that's the key to loneliness. And this again, in my family with my patriarchal father, you just weren't allowed. When he made a mistake, like if we were going someplace, if he went the wrong way, you weren't allowed to say it. We just had to wait for him to recognize it because we couldn't show that we had seen his mistake because that makes you a target for his wrath. And the other thing that happens in these white supremacy, patriarchal, toxic male situations is the father will deliberately suppress first his wife because she can't exceed him, and then his children. The children cannot exceed him. And this is something I went through in my life, as I had a relationship with my dad until about the age of 15. And at that point, I started to recognize he was giving me deliberately inaccurate information that would sabotage me. And so it comes to a point where then you're like, at this moment, here's the boundary. You have to either be an asset in my life or you're out. And then he turns it against me because I am not enabling his sense of superiority he needs, this
Yep.
loneliness, this
Yep.
toxic
Yep.
control
Yep.
dominance. And then so I am now the bad guy for making him feel lonely. So that ties it up as neatly as I can do it.
And I think you're dancing around something really important. This is how we see so much violence in the
Mhm,
United States.
mhm.
And I'm talking about domestic and intimate partner
Yes.
violence,
Yep. Yep.
right? Because when you add together this white supremacy narrative that you must always be winning and you must always be dominant,
Yep. And nobody can see the failure.
and nobody can see you lose. And when you add that together with the fact that a lot of young men uh, are not raised to learn emotional processing or intelligent, this is a powder keg. This is literally TNT,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Yep.
Because you have big emotions like shame
Yeah.
because you weren't the biggest man in the
Yep.
room,
And
right? You
sexual
lost, you
frustration.
failed,
Yeah.
right? Or sexual frustration. You don't have access to the type of sexual life that
Mhm.
was promised to you under the patriarchy, and you don't have the emotional capacity to be with your own failure, your own shame.
Yes.
This leads to violence.
Yep. Absolutely does.
This
Yep.
leads to violence and it perpetuates cycles of violence because that violence is handed down generation after generation after generation. And so, if you are a man on this live or you watch it later and you have a little Tim Walls energy, and by that I mean you have some healthy relational capacity, part of your activism could just talk to a young boy, just talk to a young man,
Yeah.
right? Just share that there is another way. Um, I did my undergraduate degree in human evolutionary biology, and my final term paper was on looking at the impact of socioeconomic status on child development in evolutionary perspective. So, what happens when children of low SE, like what happens as their brains and bodies grow over time. And at that time, part of the literature that was coming out was really showing that when you tend to have low SES, you might also see other correlates happening with that. For example, violence in the home or some form of abuse or neglect, right? When that abuse and neglect is present beyond age 7, it leaves a lasting
Yeah. Yeah.
impression on the brain, right? Because as the amygdala hypothalamic loop is
Yeah.
developing, yada, 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 yada. But one of the interesting pieces of that research was that if there was even one safe adult intervention
Yeah.
in that child's life at any time between
Yes.
0 and 7,
Yeah.
that it could change the trajectory of that child's life, right?
Mhm.
For them to know that the reality that they're living in is not the only one that exists, right?
Yes.
You may feel alone, but you're not alone, right?
Mhm.
You may feel like you have to do this dominance display to gain value, but you are born with value. It is your birthright. You are worthy. You are lovable. By the sheer improbability of your existence, you deserve to be loved, right? If they can hear that message from one safe, and
Yeah.
particularly if it's a safe adult male figure,
Yeah.
that can be your activism.
Yes, yes. And what you said, I wrote an article about this not too long. It's interesting. All these things I come at it from a slightly different angle, but I have been walking past and I was doing it. Natasha's here in our chat. I was chatting with her about this. Like what happens in these rural communities, extremely hostile rural communities. Because I grew up in that, and very close to that. I did have a couple positive things. But, like, one of the things they do, like, and the development of your ability to have compassion is something they deliberately obstruct, like, and that's why I think the white supremacy culture is just so casually cruel. Like, there's such a casual cruelty in the United States of America where we endure, school shootings. What the hell is wrong with our culture? And it's
Yeah,
because so many people in our culture have had they've been deprived of the ability to have a healthy development of compassion. And like one of the examples I brought out was, they do these farm things where they give kids a piglet. I remember, it's like, and you have to raise up the piglet and then it's taken to market and slaughtered. And it's just sort of like make you love something so they can kill it. And that's something too. I hid so much of the things I learned to hide all the things that I cared about from my dad because I knew if he found out something I loved, he would destroy it just to be like, "Well, I'm saving him pain in the future." That's like the idea that they have. And exactly what you're saying, it creates that powder keg that leads to sexual frustration. You can't have a connection. And then you end up getting to the point where your wife or kids see you fail. And then these men decide, because they've been so contorted in their mindset, they murder their own family because they can't have witnesses to their failure. That's the reality of what we're looking at here. But yes,
yeah,
and I say I reached the same conclusion you did. A couple people being kind, but also it was the books. I was just doing nothing but reading the books. And you'd read in these books people from another time who had compassionate, loving relationships, and I would live in those worlds. Like, how do I have this? And it's like there's no example of it in my physical reality. But I know this has to exist because one part of my heart longs for this, right? And I don't want to be a person who's like pulling on pigtails. I don't want to hurt people like this normalized way of boys. Oh, he's just no, that's awful. You don't do that to people. You don't hurt them. You treat people, but it is hard. It is hard to navigate that. We have and, the people that weren't readers, they don't come out of that. I read every book I could find, and it's like I fell in love with all these characters. There's a long time where I was more in fantasy reality than real. That's probably why I'm a writer now because I can fall into that so easily. The world, I would just look forward to going to sleep because it's like, oh, at least I get to be in my dreams at night, and I don't have to live in this miserable dystopian reality. But what you're saying is exactly right, and we just need to do more things. Yes, I try when I'm out helping my daughter's basketball team or whatever. And this is with girls, but I'm always like, just tell them good job. Like a man just saying good job, saying that to young like one word. It's astonishingly small how much of an impact you can have with just little spontaneous acts of kindness. And yes, particularly taking some young men under their wings, telling them to stop watching the ridiculous YouTube of the guy like massaging meat, like, oh, I'm the man. I only eat protein. They have these weird like fitness gurus, but they attack our young men in so many different ways. And as frustrated as I am with the whole MAGA movement, there is a part of me where I feel empathy, and it's like this is what we have to get through to. because yes, it is a powder keg. It causes violence, and we just have to do something about it.
100%. I think what you just described is exactly why authoritarian regimes always start banning and burning books.
Yes, they do. They
Because
do.
if you can start to conceive of a different future reality possibility, ideas are very dangerous things in
Whew.
authoritarians. And I think you see it if you ever dip over into Fox News, which I'll
Oh God.
occasionally engage with. It's just like, oh, like when they didn't even show Trump wearing the baseball cap at
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
dignified transfer, and you're like, I'm not from a military family by any means, but even I know you don't wear your damn ball cap, right? So
Yeah.
the fact that folks can be in such an echo chamber, and I think this is why this decision out of California against Meta and YouTube that happened earlier this week, where the class action lawsuit
Yeah.
was upheld that they did intentionally design their platforms to be addictive. This is so important because part of what we're experiencing now is a direct
Yes.
consequence of this creation of bubbles that we all have the perception that our social media is the only social media and it is the reality and it is the world. It's not the fucking world.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Get offline, touch grass, talk
Yeah.
to people that don't look like you. This is so, so important.
Yes.
And engaging in ideas that aren't like yours. And if you're wondering if you're in a thought bubble or that your ideas might be wrong, or maybe you're in a cult or whatever, hold your ideas up to scrutiny. And
Yes.
if you are allergic to the idea of letting your thoughts be scrutinized or
Yes.
challenged in some way, you might be in a thought bubble. You might be, right? Like,
Yes.
it is normal and healthy to have your ideas be challenged or to meet people that have different ideas than you. Um, and when that's not possible for you, I think that's a really important
Yes.
sign. But this decision out of California, I think, was so very important because I see the youth, some of them, right? We're talking about the young men in the manosphere, and that's a really big problem. But you're also seeing, I just took an international flight, 8 hours. I sat next to a Gen Z kid who was doing that. I don't know, I think they call it raw dogging the flights.
Okay, I don't know
Uh,
what that means.
Basically, they're rejecting media. A
Oh.
large swath of Gen Z is
Oh,
rejecting
okay.
media, and
Okay, that wasn't so bad. Yeah, I thought that could
there's
have
a
been bad.
trend where they'll go on a flight, no matter the length of it, and they just stare straight forward at the seat.
Okay.
They don't watch a movie, they don't
Wow.
pick up their phone,
These kids are desperate. That's
they
sad.
don't listen
Yeah.
to music, and I witnessed this for the first time, and I was like, "Wow. Wow.
Deliberate. Yeah. I mean, that was just life when we were
Wow."
growing up. We would just like sit there and
It was
stare off in his
life.
face.
It was absolutely just life, but
He's so cute.
now,
Yeah.
it kinda gives me a little bit of hope that some young folks are starting to wake up to the reality. Look, I'm an elder millennial. I am part of the last group of people that had an existence before social media,
Mhm.
and I experienced life up until about 15, 16 without there being any social media. And
Yeah.
then as it came in, I mean, like my first social media was LiveJournal. And then after that, there was MySpace. And so even then, it was still, it was exciting, but you were still primarily living an in person life.
Yes.
And I honestly really, really feel for
I
the young people that are alive that did not have that experience today.
it's what you just said is fascinating, and I think I have some insight into this. Yeah, I'm Gen X, so I'm like, yeah, I predate that. And one of the thing I've noticed is these platforms, even like streaming services, they've deprived us of choice. We don't know, and so what you're talking about is young people just saying like, "God damn it, I'm going to this is gonna be my choice," because every other thing that they interact with decides for them. The algorithms show them what they see. You know, like even on streaming services, a comedy, 5 same movies, a drama, 5 same movies. It's like I'm just like I know these movies, and I'm old enough where I just remember all these old movies, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember vinyl records. Natasha.
Yes.
Just give me, but it's just sort of like I remember, and like there's all these movies. All my favorite movies are impossible to find. Like I have to track them
Yeah.
down, and I'll spend this time. And I'm like, don't give me this screen. You know, I want a spreadsheet with the date, and I want to be able to search it with just the title and just the date. I don't need to see the picture. None of that exists, and everything coerces us to
Yeah.
consume the information they want us to consume. And just the other day, I had this experience where when I was driving my kids a couple hours out of town, I'm like, I'm going to grab my old CD case. And just the change from listening to the radio where the choice is made for you, the choice is imposed upon you, to just like, let's listen to this CD. You put something in, and it's like alternative music like I always used to listen to, where they're engaging in ideas that it's just you instantly just felt this massive change. It was like going from something bland to like a buffet, you know, it's just like, oh my, like from switching from oatmeal to like a buffet. It's like all these ideas. And I was just like, oh, I just started feeling power. But what's sad is, yeah, we got these 20-year-old kids who don't even know that choice used to be a thing, where you could go to a video store and pick the movie you
Yeah.
wanted. Like, oh, I'll pick this one, as opposed to they just scroll through they show you 20 same films over and over until you finally relent and watch the shit they're pushing down your throat. And the algorithms of scrolling, where we don't even see that all this stuff is character, or it's designed just for you. Like your social media looks different than mine. You know, they're
Yeah.
trying to influence me different. I've compared notes with Arturo Dominguez. He gets really weird message. We're just like, okay, this is what they're trying to do. The young kids don't know that. So yes, I mean, I didn't really realize. It's amazing though, this evolutionary response where they're making the choice to be like, fuck it, nothing. I'm just gonna I'm just gonna look at nothing then. And it's like,
It was
okay, we gotta help
uncanny.
them though. Yeah, it's amazing. Good for
We
them
have to
though. I
help
applaud them.
them. Yeah,
Yeah.
we have to help them. Absolutely. I mean, this is part of our responsibilities as elders.
Mm.
We have
Well, that doesn't
to
apply to
reach
you.
back
You're
into.
I'm the elder here.
Well, it's true, but I use a strong retinol and a lot of sunscreen, so I might be older than I look. But they're also doing things like they're driving a resurgence in flip phone sales. So they're like
Yeah,
very
good for them.
intentionally kind of walking away from the smartphone
Yeah.
and rejecting the idea that the phone, because phones are very invasive now. Like they're always in your shit. They're directing
Yep.
you. They're
Yep.
beeping at you. They're
Yeah.
vibrating. They constantly want your attention. Every app you have wants you to enable permissions, blah, 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 blah. It's absolutely shaping our realities, and it's shaping those realities in very individualized way, which, my career before starting a nonprofit, I worked in digital strategy and marketing at the dawn of the personalization revolution.
Mhm.
So, where all of your emails from companies now say, Dear Walter,
Yeah.
back in the early aughts, the naughty oddies, that wasn't possible. It said, Dear customer.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Do you remember
Mhm.
those? Dear
Yep, yep.
customer, here is your order, blah, blah, blah. And so right when they started be able to personalize and address things to you, they also started to try to, oh does he want to see only specific things? And this was sold to us as the fucking horsemen of the capitalism. I'm so glad I don't work in marketing anymore, but it was sold to us as this thing that consumers really wanted and they really needed. And now it's like, ooh,
Yeah.
I was manipulated and then I manipulated people. And so it's like when you know better, you do better. And I think that that's definitely part of the journey that has led me into the work with the Glow Initiative, because I just got really fucking tired of seeing unequal access to this modality that
Yes.
can really help people. And I decided one day, literally on this beige couch, like I write about it on my Substack, I'm like my beige couch moment, where I was just like, honestly, fuck this shit. And like, let's hold my beer. Like, let's see what I can do if there's something that I can build. Um, and that's a message that I always want to leave people with.
Yes.
because movements are
Yes.
started that way. Entire movements that can change nations are started by some person getting fed up and
Yep.
seeing what the hell they can throw together. That's what I did. If I did it, you can do it.
Uh,
And for me, it's definitely been a way to reach into community and into the lives of women that I would otherwise have never had access to. Um, and a
yeah.
way to offer a service that, while it is online, it is a one-to-one experience,
Mhm.
right? It's a woman sitting in front of a coach. It's not like a platform or anything
Yeah.
like that. It's just that one-to-one, highly relational, supportive type of resource that we're aiming to provide people. And, honestly, if I can do it, literally anyone else can do it.
Yes. Oh, I applaud you. That's so wonderful. And I want to give people some hope too. And I always say, like these advancements, these tech bros and all these things, they don't have the power to control us that they think they do. They've become
Mm-mm.
emboldened by their successes, but it's sort of like, as Abraham Lincoln said, you can't fool all the people all the time. And I always take the example of commercials where they still play commercials on the radio. Within 2 seconds, you know it's a commercial, right? And so some of these things are new and the tactics are new in marketing. Um, but kids are awakening to it. A song came on the radio the other day and my kids were like, that's AI. And they made me shut it off. And it's like through evolutionary, for our very survival, we learn to
Yeah.
avoid these dangers. And, you know, in every dystopian novel that I read, they're all the same. They kind of show our reality. We watch those things in V for Vendetta or 1984 or We and all those things. It's always you're in this routine. You're just kind of bludgeoned by this routine. You go through this thing you hate every day, but you're just going through it. And then see somebody and you fall in love. And just that need, what is that? You don't even know what it is. And that's what makes people say, you know what? I'm going to give up on everything I've worked for my whole life and pursue this thing because it is not this corrupt society that I live in now. And they go for it. And that cannot be contained. And the work you're doing to help, well, help women have more power as a way, but we also have to show young men how they can have caring, loving, compassionate, cooperative relationships. Both those things are important. I have 2 daughters. I always tell them, I'm like, think of them all the boys in your classroom. They're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Do you want those boys to be in charge of your finances?" They're like, "Hell no. Those guys," because my kids are exceptional students. And I'm just like, "Yeah." And it's like, you can have it's like my wife and I, we have our separate bank accounts. We handle our shit that way. It's like, I we don't have to compile this. I want her to have as much power as possible so that if that holds me to a standard where I have to be a good partner. Otherwise, she's capable of leaving. And that's you're right to do that. We're right to ask questions. And these authoritarian systems want us to submit our control and our personal autonomy and our ability to have affection and our feelings. And the work you're doing is big in that. The more power we give to women, I think, just where we make compassion our fundamental guiding ideology, and just a maternal kind of society as opposed to conquest and dominance, one of nurturing. A lot of these problems will be taken care of itself, and there's a lot of ways to do it. So, again, I applaud you for what you're doing.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I so appreciate it. And I agree. I think that one thing that I often say to people, because a lot of people, when I do speak, or I get DMs, but people they are feeling, many people are feeling really hopeless
Mm,
at the
yeah,
moment, and they are just feeling like they have there's nothing that they can do to feel better or to have any kind of impact or change. And the thing that I often say is, like, not everybody needs to run for public office and,
yeah,
fight the man. Like, that might just not be your fight, right? This society is huge and it's complex. And
yes,
there could be something that is just important to your heart. Go do that thing, right? Do the thing that's in your power to do. You don't have to start a nonprofit. That's actually, like, very
yeah,
difficult, and don't recommend. Like, if you have any other choice, please avoid, because it is hard, it's difficult, and that's just my path. That's my path, and it sounds like you are Walter, engaging in the ways that you feel called to engage. But I think that if we can let it be enough, that
Yeah.
our activism can be
Mm.
hyper local, hyper focal, right? It can be really just in our sphere of influence if that's what you have to give or if that's what you feel called to give. If we can let that be enough, then I think we'd have a lot more people active,
Yeah.
right? Because there's still a lot of
Yeah.
people that are sitting on the sidelines right
Well,
now.
that's
And
yep.
we need a lot more people out on this field if we are going to I don't want to use these like save the soul of the nation. I don't know, but like
That's fair.
if we are going to return to more sanity,
Yeah.
compassion, community, love, heart, kindness, values that are derided by the manosphere, which I
Yeah.
will include the current administration
Mhm.
among.
Mhm.
But everybody likes them when they experience them. If we're going to return to that or cultivate that, water those seeds,
Yeah.
then we need a lot more people out on this field. And if people can allow their activism to be whatever size it can or needs to
Yeah.
be, I think we'd see a lot more people out here taking these actions.
Yep, and we've been indoctrinated to surrender our power. That's really it. I keep the example from the movie Sinners. When the vampires are at your door, you don't have to let them in. You say, "You can't come in." And we're in this place where we surrender that on day 1 before we're even aware of anything. It's like they're making us sign contracts when we're a baby, and we're then committed to that for our whole life. But, yeah, the more that we can do, we've been trained to surrender the fight. The fight is every day. They want to delay. Delay is part of this mechanism of oppression. Oh, just wait till the midterms. Wait till the next Nope. It's today. First, there's the primaries, but it's every little act of kindness, empowering women to have greater power in your local businesses is a great thing to do. Empowering your children. Um, fi- File that HR complaint that you've been putting off because you've been told the system isn't really for you. Anything
Document,
like
document, document.
yes, all those things. And yeah, and just being an example of positive things. But yes, it's the little
Yeah,
things, all these little things. We just keep thinking we're our focus topple, get the orange skid mark out of the Oval Office. It's like that's not even important. There's 1,000 things you can do in your community today that'll make that an inevitability. So yeah, feel your power, everybody. I think that's a big one.
100%. 100%. People ask me sometimes, like, were you scared to start a nonprofit in the gender equity space in this landscape? And the answer is
Yeah.
about 15% yes. And the rest is like, oh no, like this is
Yeah.
literally the time that you do that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
This is literally the heroine's journey.
Yeah.
There is something catastrophic going on, and I am looking down the barrel of a really unfortunate future if we do not take action.
Yep.
If I ever have kids, if I ever have grandkids, and they ask me, what were you doing during this time? I want my soul
Yeah.
and my conscience clean, man. And
Yep.
what uh, I'm doing partly as a direct reaction to what we're seeing
Yes.
happening to women in the United States. Because if we wait until this sort of like
Yeah.
trad wife wet dream becomes reality, right? It's
Yeah.
gonna be too late. If we wait until we're under his eye in the handmaiden's tale,
Yeah.
it's really hard to pull back from that. But we can take small actions
Yeah.
today, right? And so with the Glow Initiative, we have had over 160 coaches donate their time, a little bit shy of 2,000 hours,
Perfect.
a little shy of 2,000 hours, that we've brought to 533 women in just 2 years.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. That's a
And
big
a
thing.
lot of people want us to be in a box and just provide one specific type of coaching. Like they only want us to provide career coaching, leadership coaching, etc. But we actually offer 28 different areas of coaching. Why? Because women have agency and autonomy. They can tell me what they need.
Mhm, mhm.
Number one, first and foremost, we believe in the dignity and the autonomy of our participants to self select what they need to be well. Number one. Number two, you can be the best employee ever, 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 and be totally winning capitalism and be brought to your knees
Yeah.
if your husband dies or your child dies, right? And that's why we offer grief coaching.
Mhm,
And that's why I'm never surprised when we have an executive director of a nonprofit say, you know what, I'm not going to take leadership coaching. I'm actually going to take the grief coaching.
mhm, mhm.
That's
Yeah,
It's why we offer financial coaching because just as you said to your daughters,
yeah,
do you want that knucklehead
yep,
in charge of your finances? Uh, Financial abuse is one way that women are trapped in situations of
yep.
incredible violence. And so every
Mhm.
time a woman comes through our doors and we give her access to financial coaching, that is potential access to additional freedom, that is a pathway to
Yes,
empowerment, that is a pathway to building generational wealth, potentially for the first time in her family's trajectory, right?
yeah,
These are interventions that alter not only an individual's life, but the lives of the people around them and the lives of the people yet to be born to them.
yes,
That's why
yes.
this work matters.
It absolutely does. My daughters often tell me, they're like, "Daddy, it feels like I'm cheating the system." And I'm just like, "Yeah, the system sucks. So I'm gonna teach you how to cheat the system." And it's like fair. These are just pathways. They're just the alternative pathway. They're not what you're pressured to do. They're not the choices that are jammed down your throat like we're seeing on the streaming services. And what you said before about fear, yeah, you're always afraid, but I can tell everybody from experience, compliance is no protection, because that powder keg of a person who is committed to this false ideology by which he must always be perfect and anyone who sees his failure must die, that person is a danger. And just, you have to, and part of it is that you are not the worst thing you ever did. You are still worthy of love, even when you made a mistake. These are things that have to be fundamental because they weaponize it. They leverage that. They leverage these cruel ideologies, leverage our shame and our sexual curiosity and our frustration, and they leverage our guilt and our desire to be loved. They weaponize absolutely all of the most powerful emotions in this cruel, cruel way. And these should be the people that guide us. I mean, these should be the people that are telling you things, and they destroy our ability to develop in a healthy way. And it just has led to this horrific outcome. So again, I think the work you're doing is fantastic. We're a little over time. Let me just give you one last chance to tell people where they can find you, and then we'll leave it for the next time.
You can find me here on Substack. Just click my name. I'm writing about what it's like to be the solo founder of a nonprofit in the gender equity space. My organization is called the Glow Initiative, or Glowy for short. You can find us at glowy.org, gloi.org. You can also make a tax deductible contribution of literally any size. We'll take $5, we'll take $1, we'll take $25. Every donation goes to getting another woman matched with professional coaching that would not otherwise have had access. So thank you so much for inviting me into your space today, Walter, and letting me tell a little bit of Glowy's story.
Perfect. And your Substack name is also called Glowy. The
No, it's
okay.
called The Life Aligned
Oh, perfect.
with Santana Innes.
All right, perfect. Then people can find that who hear this on video or audio only. Oh, that's been lovely. We covered some good ground. I think I'm gonna have to pick through this and find them some things to write articles about. If you do the same, tag me, and then we'll just keep
I
the
will.
the digital think tank growing and getting bigger. That we're closing the loop. I feel like we're understanding what we're up against. So I appreciate you and all you do.
I appreciate you too. And thank you to everybody that tuned in.
Perfect.
Thanks, Lynette. Bye,
Bye
everyone.
bye. Thank you.
Bye, Margaret. Bye.